Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Inshallah, we'll start with the recitation. Let's recite from ayah 31 to 36. We'll see how much we can cover, inshallah.
ذلكم الله ربكم الحق فماذا بعد الحق إلا الضلال أننا تنصرون وذلك حتى كلمة ربك الذين كفروا أنهم لا يسمعون قل هو من شركائكم من يبدأ الخلق ثم يصوره والله يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده فأنى تؤفكون كل هل من شركائكم من يهدي إلى الحق والله يهدي للحق أفمن يهدي إلى الحق أحق أن يتبع أمن لا يهدي إلا أن يهدى فما لكم كيف تحكمون وما يتبع أكثرهم إلا الظن إن الظن لا يغني من الحق شيئا إن الله عليم بما يفعلون الله عليم عظيم
الله أحسنت. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our deeds in this holy month of Ramadan and grant us thorough and complete forgiveness and purification, inshallah. Continuing on reflections on the ayat of Sura Yunus, as we said, named after Nabiullah Yunus ala nabina wa alayhi salam, because of the unique situation of his people in actually seeking forgiveness and returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore repelling the imminent punishment or imminent disaster that was coming upon them. Inshallah, we can learn from them and protect ourselves from the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set in the formative level of the creation. He set the consequences and we subject ourselves to whichever consequences we want with our actions. And so we ask Him to protect us, inshallah, from the actions or the evil actions of those who disobey Him and defy nature, in fact, especially in this holy month of Ramadan. The current ayat we said the surah is Makki or Makkiyah, and therefore deals with reminders of the core principles, Tawheed and Nubuwwah and Ma'ad, the oneness of God, the fact that He has no partners, and the prophethood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Holy Quran, and also reminders of resurrection and the Day of Judgment. The ayat that we are now up to, once again in ayah 31, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of certain realities about God and the oneness of God. There are some previous ayat that again spoke of the resurrection and how there would be a day of judgment. هل هنالك تبلو كل نفس ما أسلفت ayah 30, dealt with the section to do with resurrection. Once again, coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator, the maintainer. He says, قُلْ مَنْ يَرْزُقُكُمْ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. Say to them, Ya Rasulullah, tell them, ask them, مَنْ يَرْزُقُكُمْ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Who is the one who sustains you from the heavens and from the heaven and the earth? Perhaps here, sama being in the singular is because it is referring to sama ad-dunya, the first level of sama. As you may know, the samawat, our scholars, they say the first level is what we know, what we see and know. All of the galaxies, the stars and all of that. And this is in one of the ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, زَيَّنَّا السَّمَاءَ الدُّنْيَا بِمَصَابِيحِ. We beautified the sama of dunya, the heaven that belongs to this dunya, with lanterns. The stars referred here as lanterns. You know, they are like scattered lanterns in the sky. And so we know that these masabih, these stars, are in galaxies. They're not in just one. They're not part. In fact, they're not part of the solar system. They're beyond the solar system, way beyond the solar system. So what we see is in all the galaxies. So there's the suggestion is this sama is referring to the first sama. And the sustenance coming from the sama and from ard, perhaps referring to the fact that it is through the sun that we have life in this world. Therefore, we have sustenance. If it wasn't for the sun, we would not have any life on earth. We would not have the vegetables growing. We would not have the trees growing. Therefore, we would not have animals living. We wouldn't be living. So that is the aspect from sama. And this is why some previous nations considered the sun as their god, or the sun as a symbol representing God. This is because they realized how significant is sun for life. And so they considered it to be the source. And that's sama. Al-ard, even when it comes to anything growing on earth, it also with sama, we have the rain falls from above. And that's also the cause of vegetables and trees and vegetation growing. So in fact, one of the beautiful things in Florida is the sun and the rain. Yeah. We have rain, sun, rain, interchanging, and so everything's growing. Especially this time of the year, you have to, catch up with the landscaping and maintenance because it is growing so quick. These are the two things from sama, perhaps. There could be other aspects that we gain from sama that we are not fully aware of or familiar with, even the effects of the stars and the star signs. They probably have effects on our earth and our lives, but how, we don't know. We have astrologists trying to make suggestions that this is what it means, this is the star sign, all of that. Most of what they say are nothing but a bunch of fabrications and lies. كذب المنجمون وإن صدقوا. The munajjimun are the astrologists. The hadith says they are lying, even if sometimes it tends to be truth. And sometimes they throw all sorts of nonsense, and one of it catches. And so it doesn't mean that they're telling the truth. So sama, again, we have the concept of mawafi' an-nujum, in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ وَإِنَّهُ لَقَسَمٌ لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عَظِيمٌ. I do not swear here means it is a big qasam. It is way bigger than actually saying أقسم. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, sometimes He says, وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا. He swears by them. Here, He doesn't say وَمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ. That would be swear. He says فَلَا أُقْسِمُ. It's just like when He says لَا أُقْسِمُ بِهَذَا الْبَلَدِ. This is a qasam. This is God swearing by something, but even bigger than a normal swear. It has significance. He says, I don't swear by the positions of the stars, and it is a swear if you knew, لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ, if you knew, it is a big one, great one. لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عَظِيمٌ. So it is definitely there is definitely some sort of an effect and significance for the positions of the stars and the presence of the stars for us, but we don't understand. Not the astrologists and not science today. Maybe sometime in the future they might have some explanations. However, remember, before the Imam comes, we will only have 2 out of 28 letters of knowledge. And the rest will be given to us once the Imam is with us, inshallah. So then that's when we learn a lot of truths and realities that we did not have knowledge of. This is rizq, مَن يَرْزُقُكُم مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Ard, we know the nutrients that plants and anything that we consume from earth, a lot of the nutrients are from earth. So some aspects are from the rain, and some of them are from the sun, and some are from earth, and also the fact that they're working together. You know, rain rises from earth, and then it rains back on us, and so on. So that's the regarding sustenance. And then he says, the next one, he says, أَمَّن يَمْلِكُ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ. It seems like there's a gradual ascension in the significance of the God reminding us of His blessings. So the first one is the sustenance. Sama and ard, you have sustenance. What makes us humans and makes us different to the animals, or even different to the inanimates, perhaps rocks and things that don't have any life in them. What makes us honorable as humans is our ability to understand, learn about things, and that requires our hearing and our vision. We see things and we hear things, we understand, and that's how we become the intellectual humans that we are, inshallah. So the next level of just existence, the first level is existence. That rizq, some of it is for our animals, and some of it in Quran tells us, in terms of eating and drinking, we're the same. We're being provided for just like the animals are provided for. One of the suggestions for وَفَاكِهَةً وَأَبَّا is that abba is what grows, but animals eat. Fakih is what grows and humans eat. And the ab is for the abba is referring to what is growing, but it's useful for animals more than us humans. And we have other references that in terms of eating and drinking, we're the same as animals. However, what differentiates us is our intellect, our aql. And the tools of learning for aql are the most significant tools are, in fact, seeing and hearing. So he says, after saying, مَن يَرْزُقُكُم مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ, أَمَّن, then who is it that grants you? He owns, in other words, he's the one who gives it to you. What is it? السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارِ, hearing and vision. Sam is could be a singular or could be plural. Although absar is plural, sam could be singular. There are suggestions that with the absar, sometimes we see things. Basically, it is given in the plural because we could have seeing things from different angles, which is interesting. You know, when you look at something, you can look at it from different angles. But hearing it, it's this. You all hear it the same type thing. There are other suggestions why one is in the singular or one in the plural, but the other suggestion is that sam could be used in the plural itself. Yeah, the term sam could be plural. So who gives you the hearing and the vision? Sam'a wal absar. And then the next level is the life versus death. وَمَنْ يُخْرِجُ الْحَيَّ مِنَ الْمَيِّتِ وَيُخْرِجُ الْمَيِّتَ مِنَ الْحَيِّ. Who is the one who brings out the living from the dead and brings out the dead from the living? Now some say this is referring to life and death, as in the physical life and death. And it could be, but it also could be more than that. And our scholars suggest that it's probably more than that. Now, this is speaking about real life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He speaks about His messenger, He says, answer the call of God and His messenger. استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم. Answer the call of God and His messenger when they invite you to what revives you, what gives you life. Okay, so you were living physically before, but that's not real life. And they revive you, they give you the real life. That is the people who answer the call of God and His messenger. Otherwise, those who are living a sinful life, a devilish life, a life in obedience to their devils and temptations, desires, their nafsul ammara. These people are living like the dead, like walking dead. After their desires, you'll see some who don't have real purpose in life. And that's not an insan, that is not a human being. So some suggest that this ayah is, or this part of the ayah, is referring to being guided through whatever He gave us in terms of our hearing and our vision. Now, again, we said it's levels. So we eat, we sustain life through eating. So God has to provide, or He provides for us from the heavens and the earth. He provides for us, we live. He gives us our vision, our hearing. Therefore, we are guided through them. We learn about things. We are guided through them. And then He guides us to the point that we become a living person, a real living insan, a human being who's living, a human being who understands, who's awake, who's not in a slumber. And then, وَمَن يُدَبِّرُ الْأَمْرَ. Who is the one who takes care of all the affairs, regulates and manages all the affairs? Here, perhaps it is suggesting that it is beyond just individuals. When we have an individual, we eat, we drink, we see, we hear, we live, but to actually live a proper human life, we have to live a social life. And so that requires some sort of regulations, some sort of laws, and also intervention, and God intervening and making sure that the human society is moving in the right direction. And so this is perhaps what يُدَبِّرُ الْأَمْرَ. All of these are given as proofs of the oneness of God. To who? To polytheists. And the answer, when they're asked that question, God tells the Prophet that they will say to you, فَسَيَقُولُونَ اللَّهِ. They will soon say, they will in the future, in the near future, سَيَقُولُونَ اللَّهِ. They will say Allah. This is important to understand. This is speaking to their fitrah, to their nature that God created, and the innate nature that He created all of us in. But also, it is speaking based on some of their beliefs. So, mushrikeen, polytheists at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and perhaps many of them today, that part of their innate nature or instincts, that part of their fitrah, is still there, that there is a God and He is the creator. He is, when any nation, when they have tough times, they turn to Him. There's droughts, no rain. What happens? Even the non-believing farmer at that point will start turning to God. Often, where do we turn? They turn upwards to the heavens. Yeah. So some of them, they thought God is the sun, because that's where they see, okay, you are controlling things, do something for us. Wal-'iyadhu billah. That's their perception. So that part of their fitrah, that God is the one who sustains, was still there. They knew. And therefore, the Creator is the one who gives us the hearing and the vision. The Creator is the one who guides and basically revives, gives life both on a basic level and on a human level, on a physical animal level, and also on a human level, both lives. All of this they acknowledge, and He also plans and regulates everything for the society, for humanity. They know this part. They know within themselves. They don't deny it, and they will say to you, فَسَيَقُولُونَ اللَّهِ. Then ask them, فَقُلْ أَفَلَا تَتَّقُونَ. Do you not want to guard and protect yourselves? Why do you go and worship the idols? What do they do out of all of these things? What do they do? Can the idols bring down the rain? Can the idols make the sun rise for us? Can the idols do any of these things? When Namrud was debating with Nabiullah Ibrahim ala nabiyina alayhi salam, he said, I am God. So he initially, the Prophet says to him, my Lord is the one who gives lives and takes lives. Yuhyi wa yumit. So he came up with a plot and he said, I can do that. Then Nabiullah Ibrahim said, well, my Lord brings the sun from the east. How about you bring it from the west? Make it turn around and start coming up from the west. He had no answer. فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ. He was dumbfounded. That's buhita is like dumbfounded. He had absolutely nothing to say. The non-believers, they know that their idols, or even individuals who are considered as their gods, whether it's Namrud or the idol, whatever it is, cannot do any of these things. All of these things have been planned and created and planned and regulated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why are you not guarding? And then he says, فَذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ رَبُّكُمْ الْحَقِّ. ذَلِك is, we call it ishara, to point to something or someone. And it is to say far in a sense, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is far from being seen with our vision and heard with our hearing, with our physical hearing. we cannot reach him with those things. So he is far in that sense, or far in the sense that we cannot fully understand God and fully comprehend his essence. So that is far. Meme in there is for you. Antum. Meme is the pronoun for you. Dhalikum. It is a very interesting way of saying that is God, almost like saying that is for you, so that you understand, so that you are aware that is God for you. فَذَلِكُمُ اللَّهُ. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He is your Lord. رَبُّكُمْ. There is so many reminders in this ayah and this part of the ayah, speaking to them, almost like knock, 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 knock on their heads. Wake up, wake up. ذَلِكُمْ Allahu Rabbukum, your Lord. And then he says, Al-Haq. He is the truth. He is the absolute truth. In fact, anyone who searches for truth in any field in this world, they will find God. They will find what one of the scientists, I remember watching a video of a scientist who he developed a technology of digital imaging and basically using some images that are taken by certain cameras and then using the digital technology to make it 3D and live with full colors and so on. And he had done the birth of a child, a video on the birth of the child from the initial stages, and it's all even magnified and so on, to the birth of the child. And throughout the whole thing, all he could say was divinity, divinity, divinity. He kept on reiterating that this is divinity. You cannot explain this without understanding that there's something beyond us, beyond anything we could understand and comprehend. So when we search for truth in any field, people will find the truth, al-haq, and that is none other than the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, فَمَاذَا بَعْدَ الْحَقِّ إِلَّا الضَّلَالِ. After truth, there's nothing except falsehood, being astray. What is after truth? He says, فَمَاذَا. Therefore, what is after بَعْدَ الْحَقِّ except ضَلَالِ, being astray? All of the things that you ascribe as partners to God, all of the laws that you consider as divine laws and you implement in your society, all of these things are dalal. Only haq from God. Haq is from God, everything else is dalal. Very, very interesting statement from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, whatever comes from us is knowledge and is truth, because it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He taught them. Very important to keep in mind. Whenever we speak of besides God, those who you're following, those who you're expecting intercession from, all of these things, it is not referring to prophets and righteous ones and the successors of the prophets. These are in line with God and guiding us to God. Or it is referring to those who are in opposition, opponents, those who there is no scripture teaching us that they are significant. There's no religion or no monotheistic religion. None of the Abrahamic religions or monotheistic religions would suggest that idols would do something for us. Idols could guide us. Idols, none. Therefore, all of this is dalal. The laws that they made in Jahiliyyah and in many other societies also, whether they considered them as some sort of divine law in some nations, Or in today's modern world, they consider it as civil law. If civil law is in contradiction with divine law, it's dalal. It is nothing but dalal, whatever it might be. Some people, yes, equality and human rights and equal chances, all of these things are beautiful, but they have to have limits, and God is the one who can put the limits. Outside of that is dalal. Freedom of speech, yes, beautiful, has to have limits. And everyone agrees, interestingly, in certain areas. You can have freedom of speech until you start becoming anti-Semitic. And what defines anti-Semitic? It's only when you speak of certain people. It's not, it's not across the board of like who is from that, lineage, if you wish. It is certain people. You speak anything against them, anti-Semitic. Otherwise, you can speak against other things. You can speak against Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam all you wish. There's no problem. There's no label made for it. So again, humanity knows that there are limitations, but where they put the limitations often is errors. The one that has no error in it and it's absolute truth is God's law. فماذا بعد الحق إلا الضلال. Then he says, فأنا تصرفون. Sarf is when you turn one back. When, for instance, if you say صرفه, you say to someone, okay, you're excused or you're dismissed, whichever. It could be now you're excused, because in a gathering, you should not leave the gathering. It's a good, perhaps, reminder or lesson for the modern generation may not have some of these etiquettes. If an elderly is sitting there and you're sitting with them, you should pardon yourself. Even the Western culture has this, the good part of the good etiquette in the Western culture that is there as well. And this comes from religions. Even in the gathering of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the believers are those who ask him for permission, pardon themselves. Am I excused to leave? So that is when you say, okay, you're excused, or when somebody is somehow dismissed, like you cannot be here. That's also. In any case, that's the term. فَأَنَّا تُصْرَفُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, where are you turning back and going? Where are you going? Haqq is with God. He is the creator, the sustainer, the maintainer, the guiding, the reviving. And he plans everything for you, regulates everything for you. Through him, you get all the good things. And where are you going? If you're not with the truth, you're going towards falsehood. You're going down the ditch and you don't realize it. You're going in a fire and you don't see yourself falling in a fire. فَأَنَّا تُصْرَفُونَ. Then he says, كَذَلِكَ حَقَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ فَسَقُوا أَنَّهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. It is in this way, thus, كَذَلِكَ, such, it is that the statement, the decree, kalima is the a word, but also the command, God's command. For instance, God says kun. That kalima is his command, and therefore it becomes. Be and it becomes. Yeah? Kun fayakun. Isa alayhi salam is the kalima of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, wa kalimatun min. Isa is a kalima from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning what? He did not need to even go through the process of having a father and the natural way of having children. God says, you be. And that's it. Kalimatun. And here, the kalima of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the command regarding those who transgress. God's command regarding them is truth. And therefore they don't believe. أنهم لا يؤمنون. They don't believe. Is there some level of compulsion or controlling that God is suggesting there? That He doesn't want them to believe. He made that statement, He made that decree, command, you're not going to believe. Or is it a level, a confirmation about what He said about them because of their fists? That's what we need to understand. That the command of God, the word of God regarding those who transgress, those who live a sinful life, His word regarding them is that they won't believe. That is their sins. He said, as He formed this universe, He made it so beautifully just. The universe is just. When we are good to one another, when we are dutiful to our parents, for example, we live longer. You might say this is a physiological issue. I mean, this is a physical thing. Living longer is a physical thing regarding this world. Yeah, it has nothing to do with our spirituality and prayers, but that's how God made it. You connect with your parents and are good to them and your relatives, salatul arham, you help your relatives. What happens? You live longer. Why? Because you're in line with the universe, with nature. You're synced with nature. Therefore, nature is good with you. Doesn't want you to have an accident. So it helps you not have an accident. This is literally how it works. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is constantly protecting us. What we see in terms of His blessings upon us and His protection is a fraction of, a very small fraction of His blessings upon us and His protection. There's so much in the dua we read, that there is so much of what you have done for me that I have not seen, that I have not recognized. Some of it I see. I see that you protect me, you help me. I often tell people, sometimes, as you see a child, for instance, running and they just miss a corner. They could have lost, God forbid, an eye, for instance. It's so dangerous. They just missed it. You think it was just an accident? Okay, a coincidence? There are no coincidences. That is God helping, protecting. That is nature saying, this is a servant of God, I'm going to help him. How it works, we don't understand fully. At what point was there a change, intervention as we go, or it was from the beginning? No, maybe a combination. Sometimes it's an intervention right then and there. Sometimes God sends His special servants to even intervene. A wall is about to fall. Orphans had a treasure left there. If that wall was to fall, they would have lost their treasure. What happens? God sends Nabiullah Musa and Al-Khidr, His special servants. One is a prophet of Anbiya ul Azm, one of the main prophets, and one is a special servant who lived and is living, sends them to fix that wall. Intervention. It could happen, intervention with malaika. This is physical, literally, they came. Other times it could be malaika intervening. Whichever way. Therefore, when we are synced with nature, when we are doing good, we get good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed, as He formed the universe, that a sinful lifestyle, defiance to nature, is going to lead to blindness. We have hearing, but we cannot hear. لهم قلوب لا يفقهون بها. They have intellect, they don't understand. لهم أسماع. They have لهم آذان, sorry. لهم آذان لا يسمعون بها. They have ears, but they cannot hear. There's a layer on their hearts. There's a rain, as Quran mentions, on their hearts. Therefore, they cannot comprehend anything. This is their problem. Again, it's created by them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants guidance for everybody. But He also made the system just and fair. And so there are consequences for actions. One who constantly denies and disobeys will no longer see. That's not because God doesn't want them to see, or God is choosing some to see and some not to see without any. No, He formed it in this way. Repentance, istighfar, removes that layer. And when that layer is removed, we see better. Often when some come to me and say, I don't understand this law. I don't understand why is this. I tell them, seek forgiveness. Seek forgiveness. You'll understand better. That's the reality of it. There's it's suggested to be Shafi'i's poem. Shafi'i had some poetry. One of them is the famous poem about Ahlul Bayt, Ya Ahla Bayt Rasulillah, Hubbukum. Your love is an obligation from God upon us in the Quran. And whoever does not say salawat on you has no salat. In one of his poems, he says, I complained to Waqi'a. Waqi'a was his teacher, that I cannot memorize well. شكوت إلى وكيع سوء حفظي. I can't memorize well. So he said to me, stop sinning. Sometimes you look at someone in haram. You look at what you should not look at. You listen to what you should not listen to. Ghiba is a gathering of ghiba. Is there? A gathering. Sometimes people gather, instead of putting some tea and coffee, they put ghiba on the table. And they serve ghiba. If you're there, you're going to have ghiba. There's no escape. You have no choices. Therefore, it's best not to be there. Those gatherings, it's best to abandon, leave. Wara, something. To have wara is to, I'm sorry, I can't be here. Either you guys change the topic or I'm out of here. So the teacher said, you should quit sinning. فأرشدني إلى ترك المعاصي. And then he said to me, and this part is actually a literal translation from the hadith of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. These people were students of the Imam. Those so-called Imams, they were students, either directly or indirectly students of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. So he says, وَقَالَ لِي بِأَنَّ الْعِلْمَ نُورٌ. He said to me that knowledge is a light. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says, الْعِلْمُ نُورٌ. He says, لَيْسَ الْعِلْمُ بِكَثْرَةِ التَّعَلُّمِ. Knowledge is not by studying a lot. You sit and study. And another person with little studies, he gets a point and he becomes an inventor or whatever. Or, a highly learned scholar and so on. So it is not based on studying, it is a light that God shines into the hearts of those whom He wishes. إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ نُورٌ. Ask for that light. Ask God for that light. So he said, the teacher said to him that ilm is nur, and then he said, وَنُورُ اللَّهِ لَا يُهْدَى لِعَاصٍ. The light of God is not gifted to a sinner, to a disobedient one. You're the one who's disobedient to God. God isn't going to give them shine that light of knowledge and understanding to them. So, again, فاسقون كذلك حقت كلمة ربك على الذين فسقوا أنهم لا يؤمنون. They won't believe. You give them all the proofs. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he gives them all the proofs, not you and I. Who am I? When the Prophet at his level. When people who had a pure heart, they walk in and they see him, they know this is Rasulullah. He dressed exactly like every one of his companions. How did people know him? The light, the eminent light. Even not just him, Amirul Mu'minin alayhi salam. May have shared this story. Some of these stories are so beautiful. It's every time you say it, it's fresh. A group from Yemen came to see Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Then they said, Ya Rasulullah, who's your successor after you? This is towards the end of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So it's nature, everyone is going. And these people know Quran is telling us that إِنَّكَ مَيِّتٌ وَإِنَّهُمْ مَيِّتُونَ. You will die, Ya Rasulullah. So they know, just like previous prophets died, he will die. And so the question is, who is your successor, Ya Rasulullah? He said, go amongst my companions and you will identify him and you can bring him. And that's what they did. They went amongst the companions, they saw Imam Ali alayhi salam, requested him to come. He came with them. Yes, this is my successor. Now you know him. And he said, how did you know him? They said, we had, amongst all, we saw a light. Blind are those who do not see the light of Ahlul Bayt, the Prophet and his family. Salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Some, they see the light, they believe, they have good hearts. Others around the Prophet, they were there around him, heard him. As soon as he departed, one of the eulogies or reciters in a beautiful poem, he puts about Fatima salamullah alayhi. He said, they came to you. If the Prophet gave them his will to harm you, they couldn't have done any more than what they did. If the will of the Prophet was to harm you, O Fatima, they couldn't have done more than what they did. This is the daughter of the Prophet that he kept saying to you guys, and you heard him. His hand was there. He says his palm I can see his palm on the door of Fatima. The poet says, I can see his palm on the door of Fatima. In other words, every day he came and knocked at that door and said, Assalamu alaikum ya ahla bayt al-nubuwah. The household of prophethood. It's a household. Just like the household of Ibrahim ala nabina wa alayhi salam. And he told them, he said, when you hear of Ibrahim and his household, you all are excited. Why do you get so jealous when you hear of Ishma'azzat? He doesn't say jealous. He says your faces become pale when you hear of me and my family. But Nabiyyukum wa Ahlul Bayt. They are Ahlul Bayt al-Nubuwah. This is how you treat them. They were so deep in their sins. So deep. As far as wanting to kill their own prophet. For those who say Sahaba, where are the ones that the Prophet told Hudayfa that he gave him the names? The Prophet told him these were the names amongst my Sahaba that tried to kill me. They said, Ya Rasulullah, why don't you identify them and kill them? They deserve, they're traitors. He said, I don't want to be people to say the Prophet started killing his companions. Left it there. These people, they come and do blind. That attempt to kill the Prophet blinded their hearts to the point that they could not see the purity of the household of Fatima, salamullah. He says, كذلك حقت كلمة ربك على الذين فسقوا. They went so far in transgression أنهم لا يؤمنون. No matter what they see. قل هل من شركائكم. Another group of ayat with another argument. If there are any questions or comments, please feel free to let me know. Or I don't want to call it interrupt me. It's not interrupt me. Please feel free to share inshallah. I will continue unless there is, yes, Ahsan.
In the previous verse,
Yes,
we did touch on the living and dead and living.
yes, yes.
So what's the merit in the order which is given?
ومن يخرج الحي من الميت ويخرج الميت من الحي. It's perhaps this I have not read it anywhere, but I'm seeing it here. As I'm seeing it, it makes sense because first there was a dead and then was given life. So يخرج الحي من الميت, brings the living out of the dead. Okay, that's the initial level of
the non-existing,
non-existing, if you wish, in terms of, or no life.
Okay.
That's what scientists, in fact, scientists, they are puzzled, and they're yet to answer the question of when and how did life come into existence. The universe, okay, no problem. A Big Bang, spreading, then formation of galaxies, formation of perhaps stars in their systems, formation of our solar system, the gravity of each and keeping it together, and then eventually in the right distance, our Mother Earth is in that distance. But all of this is well and good, but where did life start? How did life start? They are yet to answer that. Initially, when they studied certain organisms like the bacteria and fungus, I think it was fungi, that they said, oh, this is life from nothing, because you have a slice of bread, now it's baked, it's dead, there's no life in there, according to them at that time. When they were studying back then, they said, okay, this is completely dead, there's no life in there. And then next thing is you have some living organisms living on it, because fungi is actually, that bacteria that's on it is actually living. Okay, so now life from dead. But then they realized that that was not correct. There was a living thing there. It's just a different, it was not visible to the naked eye, and it was a little different. And once it started growing is when we were able to see it. Otherwise, it's living. So they still have not answered that question. They don't have an answer of how did the life start. Okay, we understand how did the universe start, how did the planets, how did Earth. You could go as far as, okay, then then the water formed, okay, as a cloud, then it cooled, and then the rain came, and then the oceans formed. Okay, no problem. Now it's an ocean dead. It's earth dead, dried earth and lifeless ocean. At what point did life actually start, and how? They have no answer. And that's literally what I guess this يخرج الحي من الميت is God. He brings the living from the dead. That's God, none other than God. In fact, I remember I had a debate. We were studying on in one of the subjects at university. We did the IVF, in vitro fertilization, and it was a side subject that we were doing a project, and somebody put a video of how they do the whole process. The title of it was "We Created Life." That was the title of the video. And when they were done, I had to make that point. I was so upset with the title, so I had to make my point. I said, I have a question. They said, okay, go ahead. I said, okay, they try and get more than one egg in a cycle from the mother, so that they have more chances. But I acted like, I want to understand step by step. I said, why do they get more eggs from the mother? Oh, because sometimes after fertilizing it, before they could actually implant it, it could die. So it may not always survive, and so they have to get another one. I said, but why? It's a one cell. It's a single cell. I don't know if it's even visible to the naked eye. I don't think it is. And it's a single cell. You just had it. It was there under the microscope. You're working on it. It's living and it died. Can't you just do something and make it live? He said, no. He said, when you do that, then you created life. Don't say you created life. You manipulated life. Okay, no problem. But you created life, that's a big statement. That's the reality of يخرج الحي من الميت. Life is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then ويخرج الميت من الحي is an interesting one. Now, if you only look at the physical level, the interpretations of our scholars or some scholars are a little bit interesting. They say like sometimes a mother is living and then the fetus dies inside her and he comes out dead. Okay, so that's يخرج الميت من الحي. I think that's personally again too shallow. There's way more to it than that. So that يخرج الميت من الحي, يخرج الميت من الحي. The second part is perhaps how some people die after being living in the spiritual sense with their own hands, sinfulness. They were living, okay? They were guided, and then ذلك بأنهم كفروا آمنوا ثم كفروا فطبع على قلوبهم. They believed, then they disbelieved. That's death. And therefore their hearts were sealed. Quran speaking about the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. Their issue is they believed. They were given life. God guided them. They got to that point. They were given life. And then they disbelieved. Why? Because it's more convenient for them, for worldly gains and so on. That's when the seal was put. You don't want guidance. And so perhaps the second part clarifies that it is not just the physical mayyit and hayy. It's more to do with real life of a human being and death as in dying as a human being, not necessarily dying as a physical life.
Yeah, one more if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Do you have verse 27? Like Ashabana, Kina Khalidun. Like Ashabana, Kina Khalidun, 27.
27, yes, Ahsan.
So, the mercy of Allah,
Yeah.
these kind of people.
Yeah. So, yeah. So there is an ayah in the Quran says, إِلَّا مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ. Okay? Yeah. خَالِدُونَ إِلَّا مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ. That's a simple, that's a, what do you call it? That's a more of dodging answer. Okay, I'm dodging the question. not completely dodging, but that's one of the answers. Okay, a simple answer is that we don't know how long. Okay, it is relative to this world. It's considered khulud. It's considered eternity relative to this world. So the one of the ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, خالدين فيها ما دامت السماوات والأرض إلا ما شاء الله. Okay, so there is an exception, an exclusion. That's like there's a limit to that eternity. It's not eternity as we understand it. Okay, and we know that there's no akhir except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the only awwal and akhir. Okay, so awwal without a beginning and akhir without an end. Okay, so that's the beginning and the end without a beginning and without the end. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anything or anyone else is not going to be in that way khalid. So that's one thing. The other thing is there are conditions, and many people will be freed from hellfire. Maybe most people, I would say, it could be most people. And then there are a group who would not be on that level. They would not come out of that, and they will continue the khulud, but again with the limitation of the khulud. And who are they? The stubborn ones. In Dua Kumail, Imam Ali alayhi salam says that you لكنك تقدست أسماءك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين. Hellfire will be filled with a lot of people from jinn and humans. Okay? This is the decree of God. And that's because the ones who أفمن اللهم صل على محمد when he says لا يستوون, so those who believe and act accordingly and those who don't believe and act against, are they equal? They're not equal. And then he says, you made a decree. If it was for, if we only look at the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hellfire would be bardan wa salama, cool and peace. There won't be hellfire. But there is justice. And that's part of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so there has to be some level of purification and some level of people who basically harmed, killed, did so many evil acts. They have to go through that level of purification or retribution. And eventually they will, most of them, with ignorance, they did something, wanting worldly things, they did something, too much temptation, they could not resist, they did something wrong. All of that is, the one thing. And then another one is one who stubborn, knows the truth, it's so clear to them, and is stubborn for their jealousy, diseases of their hearts, and arrogance, they don't want to agree, accept. That is a different group altogether. And they are, that's khuld for them. However, again, with a limitation of that, of the meaning of khuld in that sense. Inshallah. We have some time, inshallah. So, any questions from here? Okay. So, قل هل من شركائكم من يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده. We said, again, constant reminders of God and the oneness of God, the attributes of God, and denial or rejection of their idols or the partners they ascribed for the Almighty. He says, say to them now, is there anyone amongst your, he calls them, if you recall last week we mentioned, he calls them your partners. They consider them partners for God, but they are their partners because they called them partners for God. Remember the example I gave? A principal and the teacher, and the principal hires a fake teacher. Parents come to complain and they say to the principal, you and your teacher. The teacher is not teaching the principal, it's teaching their students. But they call him your teacher because you consider him a teacher. He's not a teacher. God says, you say to them, is there any of your partners? They're not partners for God. You call them partners for God. So your partners. قُلْ هَلْ مِنْ شُرَكَائِكُمْ مَنْ يَبْدَأُ الْخَلْقَ ثُمَّ يُعِيدُهُ. One who can begin the creation and then resurrect, bring it back. Any of them can do that? Then he gives them the answer from the words of the Prophet. In previous ayah or ayat, in ayah 31, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he asked them the question through the messenger, he says, قُلْ مَنْ يَرْزُقُكُمْ, who sustains you and this and that? Then he said, they will say, فَسَيَقُولُونَ اللَّهُ. They will say, God does that. That is in that context. In that context, they agree that it's God. Here, because they have confusion over this particular statement, then the answer comes from the messenger, not from them. So he says, قُلْ هَلْ مِنْ شُرَكَاء. It's still a proof though for them. It is still a proof used to remind them. For them, it's a proof of the oneness of God. But at the same time, they're not fully clear about it. So the answer comes from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anyone amongst your partners starts the creation or resurrects and brings back the life for the creation that was started initially, then he says, قُلِ اللَّهُ يَبْدَأُ الْخَلْقَ ثُمَّ يُعِيدُ. It is God who begins creation and then brings it back again. ثُمَّ يُعِيدُ. And this is again a reminder of the possibility of resurrection, because the doing it again after doing it the first time is easier. You made something, now you break it apart and put it back together. That's easier than that. Putting it back together is easier than the initial making of it. You have no idea of what it is, how it is, and you make it. That takes a lot. It's like car manufacturers versus the mechanic. There are engineers who are sitting there working, researching and working to come up with an engine. And then the mechanic realizes, okay, the engine has a problem, then he has to fix that problem, or a problem occurred with the car. He pulls it apart and then fixes it and puts it back together. Who's more skillful? Or which one takes more skills? The one who made it first time, or the one who's really putting it back together? So again, these are this yu'id is actually repeated in the ayah twice, reminding that this is. So the ayah could have finished with قُلْ هَلْ مِنْ شُرَكَائِكُمْ مَنْ يَبْدَأُ الْخَلْقَ ثُمَّ يُعِيدُهُ. Any of your partners can do this, start the creation and then repeat it. And then it could have said, قُلِ اللَّهُ. It is God. Okay, that answers. But no, he repeats it. He repeats the whole statement. And perhaps because the aud is actually mentioned, yu'id is mentioned, so it's actually more eloquent in that way. He says, قُلِ اللَّهُ يَبْدَأُ الْخَلْقَ ثُمَّ يُعِيدُهُ. Same statement. يَبْدَأُ الْخَلْقَ ثُمَّ يُعِيدُهُ. يَبْدَأُ الْخَلْقَ ثُمَّ يُعِيدُهُ. Amazing. Perhaps this is part of what we call balagha of the Holy Quran, and it just re-emphasizes, that it is God who does this. Only God does this, and also it has that yu'id as part of the statement, and it's happening. فَأَنَّا تُؤْفَكُونَ. Why do you al-ifk is sinfulness or turning away from God's law. Either way, why are you, in previous ayat it was أَنَّا تُصْرَفُونَ. Why do you, or where are you going away, or turning away? Here again, how and why do you go against God's law? But it's also suggested that it's lying. And if here is referring to them lying. Affak is one who fabricates lies. Okay? And it could be because and this is why the ayah responded through the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because they suggest that some of their idols could bring life back and so on. So that statement came with ifk, فَأَنَّا تُؤْفَكُونَ. I think shall we continue? Or?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. We'll try and cover this next ayah. قُلْ هَلْ مِنْ شُرَكَائِكُمْ مَنْ يَهْدِي. We'll start it at least, and we will elaborate further next session, inshallah. قُلْ هَلْ مِنْ شُرَكَائِكُمْ مَنْ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْحَقِّ. We mentioned in Ayah 31 already that God creates, sustains, and He guides. He gives the tools for guidance, and then He guides. He gives us the sam'a wal absara. In another ayah, He says, He created you, and then He gave you the hearing and the vision and the intellect or the heart to comprehend, to understand. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ, so that you may be grateful. Gratitude is to recognize and act accordingly. Recognize Him as the one who gives life and gives all these things, and therefore show it in our action. That's why the opposite of shukr is kufr, denial. So the shukr is actually the foundation of a believer or iman. A mu'min is shakur or is shakir lillah. Prayers are display of shukr lillah. Any kind of communication with God is because of our gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Giving charity is shukr lillah, and the opposite is kufr. So guidance is one of the gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in ayah 35, He says, is there anyone amongst your partners? Again, He says, your partners. قُلْ هَلْ مِنْ شُرَكَائِكُمْ, is there any of your partners who can guide to truth? مَنْ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْحَقِّ. Again, the Prophet comes from the answer comes from the Prophet ﷺ, because they may have some suggestions otherwise, but they are not truth. And because the ayah is speaking to their fitrah, to their innate nature, then they will understand. Or if they have good hearts, pure hearts, they will understand, obviously. Those who do not want to, they will not. The stubborn ones and the sinful, the deeply involved in sins, may not or would not, but otherwise they would. Those who are pure, they would. The ayah says, is there anyone, these idols that you worship, do they guide you to truth? Or even the kings that people may call may call gods, or even anything, the sun, if you call it a god, the angels who you may call God as an independent entity. Any of these shuraka that you make or you ascribe for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can they guide you to the truth? إِلَى الْحَقِّ. Then He answers, He says, it is God. قُلِ اللَّهُ يَهْدِي لِلْحَقِّ. It is God who guides to the truth. And we said the answer is from the Prophet. قُل again. Because there might be an initial level of misunderstanding. Then he asks the question, أَفَمَنْ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْحَقِّ أَحَقُّ أَنْ يُتَّبَعَ أَمَّنْ لَا يَهِدِّي إِلَّا أَنْ يُهْدَى فَمَا لَكُمْ كَيْفَ تَحْكُمُونَ. Is it one who yahdi, guides to the truth? The hidayah to truth is repeated. You can see, هل من شركائكم من يهدي إلى الحق؟ قل الله يهدي للحق. Twice. أفمن يهدي إلى الحق. 3 times so far. Until later He says, those who don't guide. Confirmation of the fact that God guides to the truth. And a confirmation that everything else that is in the opposite direction is not truth. It is falsehood. God is the only one who guides to truth. Now, you may say, what about the prophets? They guide through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The proof here is to say God is the one who guides to truth, and no one else, nothing else. The prophets are only agents of God, servants of God. Anyone who follows the prophets, today, anyone who follows the call of God, whether it be the one of my friends gave it a good title. He called it Public or Private Revelation. Okay, he was a priest in Vancouver, although he was no longer a priest at that time. And eventually, we both agreed that he was a Muslim. Nevertheless, for perhaps social reasons, that was not made as a statement. He called the aql as the tool of private revelation. So the whatever comes through Quran, Anbiya, Awliya, Awsiya, that is public revelation. It's for everyone. And then every individual within themselves, they have a private revelation. So some people who are guided through their fitrah and listen to the voice of the angels within themselves, listen to the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're guided and then they go out and try and guide others. That is guidance from God. So the guide is ultimately who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Hadi is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. God is the guide. Anyone who guides to truth and goodness, better lifestyle, better lives, better society, better family, is guiding through guidance from God. Sometimes you have, for instance, today's social workers or social studies, they may have some levels of guidance, but at the same time, they may have some errors. Okay, I mentioned last night, there's so much individualism in their teachings nowadays. I. Even the concept of affirmations. It's all about you. It's all about you. I am this. I am that. And maybe they're helping in one level, but they're also making people so selfish and individualistic that they're not able to sacrifice for the better good. A mother or a father might think, it's all about me. If my relationship and my life in my household with my family is putting too much burden on me, I have to think for myself. I have to, care for myself and take care of myself first. And with that kind of misguidance, they break a family. And I've spoken to some. I was trying to help a family. We'll finish, inshallah, with this one. I was trying to help a family from, avoid breakup or divorce. And they got a so-called professional involved, a counselor, marriage counselor. And the marriage counselor, now it happened to be a lady, it doesn't matter. I guess the gender isn't the issue. The issue is the school of thought that they come from. And her thing was, she was a Muslim, but trained in a certain way that did not coincide with the teachings of Islam. And she was like, Sheikh, they are better off living separate lives. She's miserable, he's miserable. Let him be, let him go. And I told her, if our ancestors thought in this way, most of us wouldn't be here today. If our ancestors thought in this way, most of us would not be here today. That's the reality. They kept it together. They were miserable initially, but they sorted it out eventually. And they figured it out. And they realized they have to keep it together. So they made more sacrifices and things changed. But if you don't, then a human society will shrink. Most of us would not be here today if they did not keep their families together. That's the truth. That's the reality of it. The only guide is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قُلِ اللَّهُ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْحَقِّ. It is only God who guides to the truth. لِلْحَقِّ أَفَمَنْ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْحَقِّ أَحَقُّ أَن يُتَّبَعَ. Is one who guides to the truth more worthy of being followed? يُتَّبَعَ أَمَّا لَا يَهِدِّي. I will leave this one, inshallah, for next week, inshallah. This concept of yahiddi, an amazing way of saying the verb, with a lot of possibilities. Inshallah, we'll cover that next session. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. صلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.